Today at the LA Auto Show, I got my first look at the all-new 2021 Chevy Trailblazer. This is very, very different than the last time the Trailblazer has been used on a crossover, but I expect this is going to be an excellent addition to the Chevy lineup. This slots between the Trax and the Equinox. You can think of it sort of as a tweener vehicle, although in some ways it is a little bit closer to the Equinox in terms of overall size. Up front, we have a new look for Chevy here. We have this strong dark chrome bar that runs from one side across the other, and we have a very similar divorced headlamp look to what we see in the Hyundai lineup. So we have daytime running lamps up here, headlamps down there, and then fog lamps all the way down there at the bottom. I'm not the biggest fan of this particular design style. Let me know what you think about this down there in the comments section below. Again, in terms of overall size, this slots somewhere between the subcompact and compact categories. So you could consider this a direct competitor to something like the Honda HR-V or perhaps the Toyota CHR, but you could also consider this a less expensive option, something like a RAV4 or Chevy's own Equinox. Cargo capacity in the rear rivals what we see in some compact crossovers, but it is definitely below some of the larger entries in that segment, like the RAV4, the CR-V, and of course the Nissan Rogue. Moving back to the cargo area, Chevy tells us that this is slightly longer overall and has a slightly longer wheelbase than the related Buick Encore. That's why we have just a little bit more cargo room back here. There's significantly more than we find in the Chevy Trax, and we have a two-stage load floor right there to help maximize that cargo area in the back. We also find a 60/40 folding rear seat design, but they've put the 60% side on the passenger side to make it a little bit more cargo practical. Moving to the rear, the tail lamps mirror the style that we saw out front. And then if we move to the bottom, we find dual exhaust tips, a pretty rare touch in this segment. For some reason, we aren't allowed to see what's under the hood, just like we weren't allowed to see under the hood of the Buick GX. But under here, we find one of two different three-cylinder engines. A 1.2-liter three-cylinder turbocharged engine is standard, produces 137 horsepower. There's a 1.3-liter three-cylinder turbocharged engine available that produces 155. The three-cylinder base engine is mated only to front-wheel drive and a continuously variable transmission, much like we see in the rest of the competition. But if you get all-wheel drive and the 1.3-liter turbo, then we get a 9-speed automatic transmission. This is not related to the ZF 9-speed that we see in FCA vehicles or Honda vehicles. This is an in-house design from GM, and it is definitely a lot smoother than the 9-speed that we find in a variety of different Jeep products. Hopping inside, since this is the sportier RS trim, we get the red stitching and a black trim piece at the bottom of the steering wheel. The RS trim, however, does not add any extra power. Some of these components are shared with the Buick Encore, but Chevy has really tried to distinguish this from its sibling by giving us an entirely different dashboard styling. We get very similar infotainment software here on the 8-inch touchscreen infotainment system, but the housing and the rest of the dashboard is definitely Chevy themed, quite different from what we see in the Buick. We have the automatic climate controls down here, a pretty standard console shifter right there, and some additional buttons up front for the drive modes, the all-wheel drive system, lane keeping assistance, etc. A really practical touch in this interior is that, like the Buick, we have a fold-flat front seat that makes it a lot easier to put large cargo in here. This is something that we don't see in too many vehicles out there, but we do, of course, see in the Encore and this vehicle, and we also see in the Fiat 500X. Hopping into the back seat, I was really surprised how roomy the Trailblazer is. This may actually have very similar legroom to the last body-on-frame Trailblazer that was available in the US, even though this is considerably smaller on the outside. This is a little bit longer, we're told, in terms of wheelbase than the Buick Encore GX, and that's why we get a little bit more legroom back here. You can see I probably have about 6 or 7 inches of legroom left. So if you're looking for a vehicle that could more easily accommodate rear-facing child seats or folks with longer legs, this may be a good option. Headroom is also pretty generous for the subcompact crossover segment. Even though this model has the panoramic moonroof, I have about ½ an inch of headroom left. My hair is just barely brushing the ceiling, but my head is not touching the ceiling. Now, this is still a subcompact crossover, so if I scoot over to the middle or all the way over to the other side of the vehicle, you'll notice this rear bench is just not as wide as some of the competition, but thanks to this fold-flat front seat, I could rest my feet up there if I wanted to. At this point in time, Chevy has not released complete availability or pricing information for the 2021 Blazer, but they have told us that this will start under $20,000. That puts the base price in direct competition to entries that are an awful lot smaller than the Trailblazer, so it'll be interesting to see how this does in the segment. Remember that we get the turbocharged engine standard, of course, which produces a lot more torque than we find in most of the base competition, but we don't know exactly how this is going to compete directly to something like the Hyundai Venue. The Venue is going to be coming out right about the same time as this, but it is a little bit smaller than the Trailblazer. Until we know more, be sure and hit that subscribe button down there at the bottom of your screen, and stay tuned because we will have a complete drive review just as soon as we can get our hands on this, and of course its closely related cousin, the Buick Encore GX. I'll see you all later.